Welcome back to FallingFoxGaming, everybody. I am your host Blaine, and today we're going to be doing a Kenshi Beginner's Guide for 2021. Now, if you're just beginning Kenshi in 2021, this guide will go a long way to make your day easier and your game much more enjoyable to play. I've put together this guide to help you understand how the game is played and what you can do to make the gameplay as enjoyable as possible. So let's just get started. Once you've started up the game and selected New Game, you'll be given the option of what starting scenario you want to play. There are no wrong answers to which you can pick, but some are much better suited to new players. Once you learn the game, you can select any of the starting options and still have a great time. But for beginners, here are the ones that I recommend you try first. The Wanderer. This is the Kenshi's default New Game start. You start the game with one guy and some basic gear, and that is all. You start at the hub, which is arguably the best starting location, and you won't have to worry about too many dangers, as it is one of the safest locations in all of the game for new players. The Wandering Trader. In a similar fashion to the Wanderer start, this start is quite easy. You'll begin with a backpack full of items that you can sell and a pack animal. This is a good start for those looking to play as a trader or those that enjoy role-playing a less combat-oriented start. My suggestion is to do this start if you want to follow a trade caravan around and help them out. This will allow you to loot the things that they run into, and if you heal them after combat, you'll begin building reputation with whatever faction they're a part of. Empire or Holy Nation Citizen. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You can start off in one of the major cities as one of the major faction citizens, and you can go around and try to be part of one of their factions. But be warned that both the factions have several strict rules that you must follow, so pay attention to what the NPCs are saying, or else you might find yourself in prison or laying on the ground bleeding out somewhere. The Son of a Captain. This is a similar enough start to the Wanderer and the Empire Citizen start, except that you start in the United Cities territory and you get a decent weapon. You'll also be friends with the United Cities, and you'll have the Holy Nation hate you. Nobodies and Freedom Seekers. This is my favorite way to play the game. These two options allow you to start the game with a group of people, and they're similar enough that I just kind of group them together as a similar start. Basically, Freedom Seekers start with goods to build a couple of small buildings and some okay gear, while the Nobodies start with, well, none of that. Both are great starts, and I would recommend these two starts the most after you learn how to play the game a little bit. So start with the Wanderer, learn how the game plays a little bit, and then if you're happy with where you're at of knowledge-wise of how to play the game, then go ahead and restart with the Nobodies or the Freedom Seekers start. Before you click Begin, I always recommend that you check out the advanced options to make sure you have the game set up the way you want. Scrolling over each slider, an option will tell you what it does, but I have a few words of advice for new players who don't know too much about the world. First, the hunger slider controls how often your characters need to eat. The further to the right that you have the slider, the less often you'll need to eat. For your first couple of games, I highly recommend you push this to the right by a couple of multiples to allow you to focus on learning other aspects of the game before you worry too much about food. I suggest putting it to around 4 to begin with. This will require your people to eat still, but it's far less often. Next is the Chance of Death slider. This one is tempting to lower this modifier in an attempt to keep your characters alive, but will also make the NPCs also unable to die. This can be frustrating as you may want to keep yourself alive while killing NPCs a bit more easy. There are ways to adjust that, but for now, just leave this slider alone until you get the hang of the game. Then you might want to turn it up a bit to make it easier to kill some enemies. As a side note, it can help to lower the slider in the beginning if you don't want to kill NPCs. You can still loot them and make them far less dangerous. The Global Damage Multiplier sliders simply means how much damage everyone in the world is doing. If you lower the slider, the battles will take a great deal longer, and it will really help new players get the hang of the game, and it'll help you learn the micromanaging of the characters in battle. On the flip side, if you raise this number, it means everyone deals way more damage and can potentially one-hit or even kill others in a single blow. This slider is one of the best sliders to play around with to see what you enjoy the most, as it can drastically change the feel of the game depending on what you want. Either epic slow battles to the death, or a style of fighting where it's he who hits first wins, or somewhere in between. This one is definitely a personal preference slider, so make sure you kind of play with it to see what you like. Production speed, research speed, and building speed sliders are all about personal preference. If you turn them up, then it does make the game drastically easier, but only in matters of grinding. Some people like the slow grind of the game, but if you want to get on with the later game stuff, then you can turn these up to get there faster. Remember, it's your game, play it how you like, ignore what the haters say. Number of nest multipliers. Please, please, please use this one with caution. This slider controls how many bandit camps and animal camps spawn in the world. And in the beginning, they can already overwhelm you if you're not ready for them. Once you get the ropes of the game, it is fun to crank it up and watch the world get weird as the animals can kill off towns and such with enough time passing. But I do recommend that in the beginning you do not mess with the slider too much, as you can very quickly get overwhelmed and not be able to save your game. The bandits loot the players is a pretty self-explanatory. Personally, I turn this off, as they usually only steal food or other small items, but occasionally they will steal something valuable, and it's very frustrating when the game is already pretty difficult in the beginning and then you lose your weapon or something. Easy prospecting. I don't think this one has ever worked, so don't worry too much about it. Theoretically, it's supposed to make resources equal across the map for things like farming, but as far as I know, it's never worked properly, so in general, I just wouldn't worry about it. And honestly, it's not even that big of a deal. You can farm just about anywhere, you just might have to choose a different resources if the one you're looking for doesn't work there, so don't stress too much about it. After you've selected your starting scenario, you get to customize your character or characters. You get to choose between humans, Shek, Hivers, and skeletons. Each race and sub-race have different starting bonuses and penalties to their skills. If you select humans, you can select between the Greenlanders and the Scorchlanders. If you choose Hivers, you can pick between soldier drones, worker drones, and hive prints. Shek and skeletons do not have sub-races, unless you have some of the mods, which we will cover later. Each species has a large variation at what they are good at and what they are bad at. But in the end, all the characters are equal enough that you really don't have to worry too much about what you pick. Just pick something that you think looks cool or that you want to roleplay. The stat bonuses and penalties are just modifiers towards how fast or slow they learn something. So in the end, all that it means is you have to spend a little bit more or less time training in that particular skill or stat. On the screen, I've decided to add a screenshot from the wiki page for Kenshi. It does have a little bit of information for those that actually want it. It kind of lets you know that the different races have different bleed out rates, healing rates, hunger rates, their max speed, their technical full amount of blood, and then their limb HP. This chart is mostly useless for those that are just playing the game, but those that want to micromanage just a little bit or those that like to know about the stats, this chart can be helpful. It also notes that the Hivers and the skeletons are limited in their clothing and armor selections. Neither of them can wear shoes, and skeletons cannot wear shirts or hats, whereas Hivers can wear some hats and some shirts. Once you're done editing all of your characters, and make sure that you do all of them, you have to click the little arrow, just hit confirm, and your game will start. After loading into the world, you'll likely be a bit overwhelmed with everything on screen, but you'll probably want to get started doing all sorts of fun things right away. But let's slow down for a second and explain what all the different UI options mean and learn the basics before you go and get eaten by a beak thing. First things first is the UI. There are a lot of buttons and some helpful pieces of information that we need to learn before going further. The UI is broken up into several parts. On the left is your selected character's stats. Both your own party members and NPCs can be selected to see what their general stats are. Here you can see what the character's state is, things like normal, injured, bleeding, and so on. And you can see what their current goal is, aimless, patrolling, sleeping, and so on. And their encumbrance percentage. If this shows 0%, you are under your weight limit for a heavy load and you won't be penalized. More will be explained on this part later. Below those options are the character's base stats: attack, defense, strength, dexterity, toughness, and dodge. You can usually gauge how strong an NPC is by how high these numbers are, and these only serve as a quick reference for your own characters. There's actually a full character sheet that we can look at with better information on them. On top of those two stat areas, we can see the selected character or the item's name and faction alliance, if any. That's about it. Simple, but helpful for a quick reference. Just to the right of all that stuff is the state and hit points of all the selected characters' body parts. These numbers can be hard to get used to because each race or subspecies have different maxes, and the minimum they can go to is actually dependent on their toughness. When you're just beginning, just know that a full greenish yellow bar means it's at full, and it will lower as you take damage. We'll cover these numbers more in depth shortly, but for now just know that the higher they are on the screen, the better. The bottom center of your screen is your squad tabs. Here, you can click on your characters to select them, shift click to select or deselect multiple characters, and hit the tab key to change squads. You can also select people by hitting 1 through 9 on your number keys, which you can also hold shift the same way as before to select or deselect multiple people. You can also use this tab to give items to other team members. As long as they're close enough to trade, you can just drag an item over their portrait and let go to give them the item. You can also edit the name of your squad in the full squad menu, which I'll be showing you here shortly. To the right of the squad tab are 6 buttons that open up various menus in the game. STA is your stat menu, map is, well, your map, tech is your technology window, SQD is your squad menu, and help, which opens a very unhelpful tutorial menu. A quick note, the map, tech, and squad buttons all open the same general menu that actually has a couple other tabs on it that people seem to forget about, but they're actually very helpful tabs. So we're actually going to talk about them before discussing the rest of the UI buttons. So when you push any one of those buttons, map, tech, or squad, you will open this menu here. From there, you can select any of the tabs on top, all of which tell you about different aspects of the game. The first one is the map tab. Here you can zoom in and out all around the world, you can see locations, and if you've been to one, you can actually hover over to see some basic information about the town, like the population, the faction that controls it. When you're on the map screen, you can also right-click to move your selected people much greater distances than you would be otherwise. Be careful, as your people will usually follow roads, and this can be dangerous if you're in hostile territory. The faction tab has 3 parts. On the left is your relations with all known factions, and your relations can change a few ways. Fighting a faction or imprisoning members of a faction in a prisoner's cage will almost certainly lose your reputation and quite fast. And being seen healing members of a faction will slowly gain your reputation with them. Reputation in general is usually slow to gain and fast to lose, so keep that in mind when you're working towards either being friends or enemies of a given faction. If you're friends with a faction, they will fight alongside you when they see you being attacked, as long as they're not also friends with that faction. They will heal you if they have first aid kits, and sometimes they'll move you into a safer location if you're somewhere dangerous. They will also allow you to pick them up if you so choose to. And if you're fully allied with a faction, they may sometimes also come to your aid during base raid events. On the flip side, if you anger a faction enough, they might attack you on sight, or they will in turn attempt to raid your base. The faction name tab is for you. Here you can rename your faction at any point in time, and you can change it all you want, so you don't have to worry about naming your group something and then changing it down the line. You can always change it to whatever you'd like. And then on the right side, there's an information section about upcoming events. This is primarily for upcoming base events like raids, demand, or traders coming to your outpost. But check it every now and then, just in case you missed a pop-up notification. It will help you from being surprised by a random group once you've built a base of any kind. The research and crafting tabs work mostly the same. The crafting screen is a shortcut way of selecting what each of your crafting stations are building or working on. I suggest selecting the actual station and selecting your desired item or research from there, as you'll gain a lot more information. Here, you will only see a summary. As for the research tab, on the left is the different categories of research, and in the middle are the actual texts that you can learn within them. By clicking on a research, you'll pay the book cost and start learning the tech as soon as you have someone working on your research bench. You can see how long it will take to research the tech, its cost, and what it unlocks in the description section on the bottom. In the beginning, research can be very expensive and time-consuming, so I do recommend that you take time to learn the game a little bit before worrying about research too much. Research once learned cannot be forgotten, even if that research bench is destroyed. The squad tab is where you can create and name squads to appear in your squad section on the main screen. Here, you can drag portraits around to move them to different squads or rearrange them within their current squad. To create a new squad, simply click Add Squad. You can also delete an unwanted one by clicking Delete. Just remember that it has to be empty to delete it. In the top right corner, you can see how many party members you have in total. Without mods, you'll max out at 30 total party members. You can also kick people out of your party permanently by selecting them and clicking the Dismiss button in the bottom right corner. Once you dismiss a party member, they will no longer be a part of your party, and they are generally expected to be gone for good. There are ways of getting some of them back, but just be warned that normally when you kick them out, they'll be gone forever. The dialogue tab is just a backlog of all the different conversations that you've overheard while playing, and some of the major and minor events will appear here as well. The AI tab has several options for your characters. These choices will affect how your party members will interact with the world when you are not directly micromanaging them. Most of these options will only happen if you have the job button for them active, even if they don't have an actual job set. Ditch items makes your characters unload items into storage bins if they have any. Sleeping when injured will make the wounded people go to sleep until they fully heal if they have an available bed nearby. Sit while idle has them run to the nearest chair and sit when they have nothing else to do. Heal, help, rescue allies makes your character aid NPCs respectively by healing them, fighting alongside them, and picking up injured people. This only happens when you are actually allied with a faction. If you have not officially been allied with them, they will not aid them. Just because you like a faction or you think you're friendly with them, it does not mean your people will actively help them. They have to be a true ally. The share food option will allow nearby squad mates to share food that is in their backpack. The backpack with the food in it must be worn, and both characters must be in the same squad for this to work. When the characters are close enough together, they'll share food if one of them is hungry. Feed animals. You can elect not to feed your animals by unchecking this box. If you uncheck this option, animals will not feed from backpacks or their own satchels. If you ever decide to do this, know that you are indeed an evil person. Shoot first, ask later. If this box is checked, any character assigned to a turret job will attack any potential threat. This includes neutral creatures such as animals and people from neutral factions such as bandits. Be warned, however, that this will make your turret people also shoot potential non-hostile people that will then become hostile, which can of course lead to other problems. Generally, I check this box as there are more potential baddies in the wild than not, and better safe than sorry, I always say. Finally, the follow formation box. This option makes your people follow their target in a specific manner. This does not change how your people run around together when you select all of them and then click to move them. What you need to do is assign people to follow a particular character and then move only that one character, preferably your slowest character so everyone can keep up. This can still be a bit buggy, so what I do in larger groups is I have my main guy being followed by two guys in a formation and then have the rest of the party split into two groups following each one of them. The military option is supposed to make them a bit spread out and stagger them a bit when they stop, while the caravan is supposed to create a long line, but as I said, it can be very buggy, so don't expect too much. That is it for the AI tab and the selection of tabs in general. We'll go back to the main screen now. The last couple of buttons here in the blue box are pretty simple, so I'll cover them quickly. The help menu is utterly useless. It's mostly generalized information that doesn't really help you figure anything out unless you like vague text about something that could potentially work. Honestly, if you need to look up how to do something, you're better off either on the Kenshi wiki page or watching one of my other tutorial videos that will be following this one. The inventory screen is fairly self-explanatory, but there are a few helpful things that I can say about it. You can equip items to your character here by either right-clicking an item or by dragging it to the proper slot on your person. Some characters are limited in what they can wear, namely hivers and skeletons. For them, the body part will be grayed out. Similarly, you can equip a backpack. In the same manner, you can open and close it by selecting the Open Bag button. If you opened your inventory with the shortcut key, which is the default I on your keyboard, then the backpack will already be open for you. You are limited to what you can carry by the space in your bag and your base inventory, and technically by weight. If you carry enough, you'll be moving so slow that you'll essentially won't go anywhere. More on that in the next video. I will also talk about your equipment choices in the next video, so if you need help, check that video out. In the top right corner of this menu, you can see your total weight with anything being over your total adding to your encumbrance. If you're disguised, you'll be shown here, along with how well you're disguised. And as you can see, if you're a slave or look like one, it will also be shown here. The final thing on this menu that matters is the limbs button. If you are unlucky enough to lose a limb, you can place prosthetics on your character from that button. It works just like equipping items. The final button in the blue box is the stat button. This and the rest of the UI buttons I will cover in great detail in the next video in this series. So this is going to do it for the first video in the series, and I hope you've enjoyed it and maybe even learned a few things. In the next video, I will be covering the last of the UI buttons, the stats of your characters, and general gameplay mechanics of the game, and some tips on how to improve your gameplay experience. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.